How about that? We're gonna match like we're two little women. All right, so Carter, let's start off this very quickly. It's finally official. You have Oklahoma and Texas in the league. Your thoughts on them joining?
Yeah, I think, Blake, the biggest transition for LSU fans, number one, we have got to come to the realization that the biggest recruiting battles LSU will have will more than likely be with Texas moving forward. It used to be Alabama. I'm not saying Alabama is just going by the wayside, but Texas has done a good job recruiting Louisiana. You were mentioning Anding a minute ago. This is a good example. And we've seen LSU and Texas go at it for, recruits, right? Obviously, Arch Manning was never going to LSU, but you look at a guy like Jamon Tapp, who's not worked out. You look at a guy like Derek Williams, who you liked a lot, and I liked a lot, and he's really good, and he's a 5-star guy. Texas might be our biggest competitor in the SEC when it comes to recruiting. And the Oklahoma side of it, Blake, is that's who LSU plays on rivalry week, and they will play on rivalry week more than likely for the next 2 years. That's going to take some adjusting. I talked about this in my live stream yesterday, Blake. It's kind of weird that on rivalry week, everyone plays, a team that they've been playing for a while. In Texas, while we have some history, some postseason history, Texas, Oklahoma, it's going to take some getting used to. Of course, you have the Dominic Williams story, which was interesting. But playing Oklahoma on rivalry week is going to take me a little bit, Blake, to get adjusted to. But I'm so excited to see it happen.
I think they're going to try to make Oklahoma and LSU like they tried to make LSU and Texas A&M a thing.
Right.
I could fully see that. And I think that would not be a bad PR move, right? I mean, because you're going to give Texas and Texas A&M their due. I think Texas and Alabama will be more of the rivalry that they try to pit up against one another. So I could see it. Look, let me ask you this. I've already done my spill on this. I fully believe that Texas and Oklahoma do not understand what they're walking themselves into.
I agree. I agree to a certain extent. I mean, they were the two biggest schools by far in the Big 12. There was no one close to them. And I have always said my appreciation for what Mike Gundy's done at Oklahoma State. I've always thought, at times Kansas punched above their weight. There's a lot of good stories in the Big 12. Baylor, of course. But the truth is Texas and Oklahoma were by far the biggest brands. And now you come into the SEC, and they're in, the 2 of the 8 biggest brands in the SEC now. So, man, recruiting is different. Everything's different. I think Texas is in a little bit of a better position than Oklahoma is. But we'll see. We'll see if they can keep up with a real conference here, even though I have always appreciated the Big 12's schedule structure over everything else. It's just going to be way harder for both of these schools, and we'll see what they can do in football.
You can't go toe-to-toe with Houston and be fighting for your life and Quinn Ewers be down against Kentucky. I'm just being honest. I mean, Carter, Kentucky is not a team that you could just sit here and play around with. Like, you can't just – like, Carter, last year there were a couple of times that Texas were in some battles. They're in the fourth quarter. They're in a battle. I forget who it was. I think when it Wyoming maybe. It wasn't a bad team last year. You can't do that here. And I think that's the biggest thing that people don't understand. It's like, oh, well, how does LSU lose to Ole Miss? Go ahead. Go right on ahead and find out. Because if Lane exposes one of your issues, then you're in trouble. Now, we'll have to see what Sark and Texas can do year one. I do think that they are going to both be really tough teams to play. They recruit really well. They got really good coaching staffs. But I just don't know if they know exactly what they're walking themselves into, which is going to be an issue for them. Carl, let's go to some LSU things very quickly because I know we got a lot we need to discuss there. What did you make of Garrett Nussmeier at the Manning camp? Like, look, I know that we've kind of had some of our differences in reference to Nussmeier about what we think about him. Yeah. But I think that for me, it always was that Garrett just needed to mature more. I've never not liked Garrett, But I think that there was a time in his LSU career that he was not ready for the moment. Jaden was. And I think that, look, Garrett maturing and improving has benefited him. Now I think it's obviously his time. Do we start seeing some build here? And I think for me, the question that I would ask, I just think the kid's got to limit turnovers. Because if he can do that and show that he's a good decision-making, Carter, this might be his last year here.
Yeah. Well, Blake, I heard what you said about the Manning Passing Academy, and I understand I am a huge Peyton Manning, like, diehard defender, whatever. But
everybody has good times there.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. One thing I really do like about that camp is it puts every single quarterback on an even playing field, right? You only really see that at the NFL Combine, and you only really see that at camps in the high school level. This is really the only time where, at the collegiate level, where all these really talented college quarterbacks are together and they are throwing against one another, right? It's the same kind of setting, and I understand it's not actual football.
Same receivers.
Right. I understand it's not actual football, but that's not the point, right? There's a reason why these 2-4-7s and on threes do a lot of their evaluations when everyone's together at these camps, because they're able to size everyone up against one another. Where if you're only judging by just film, it's oftentimes, going up against the same person over and over and over again. There is some signal in that. And people that I've talked to at the camps said that Garrett Nussmeier had one of the better camps as far as, the limited throws that they saw. You know who else had some throws like that last year, Blake? It was Jaden Daniels. I felt last year at that Manning Passing Academy, just watching Jaden throw there, you could see all the small little mechanical adjustments he made and how hard that dude worked on his weaknesses over the summer. And Jaden mentioned in every single interview, starting with the Manning Academy interview, he started talking about all the things that Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly was telling him and what he worked on. And he put it, you saw it in fall camp at LSU and you saw it at the Manning Academy. Jaden was throwing bombs. So, there is some signal. I understand it's not actual football. I understand it's underwear Olympics, but it's something that people thought Garrett Nussmeier threw a really live ball. Once again, very limited throws, but it is something. Now, as far as, what he's going to do this next year. Now, go ahead.
Carter, in underwear, he's going to perform better than anybody.
Right.
Because he's got all the tools. He can be accurate. He's got a big arm. His footwork, because, he grew up in a house where his footwork was taught. There are a lot of things, like in underwear, he's going to be exceptional. The thing that that I don't want to say worries me, or I don't want to, because when I say stuff like this, people think I'm putting down on him. And people have thought I've put down on him for 3 years, Carter. I've really taken a beating by saying the kid wasn't ready. I think he's ready now. I even said last year I thought he was ready. Beginning of the season, I said, look, I think that you could go to either one and not have an issue. He's just got to learn to limit turnovers.
Yeah.
Especially, Carter, because I don't know if you have a defense that's going to be good enough that can get you a stop. You turn the football over, they can get you a stop in return. And that's the biggest concern for me. He's going to have to be a great decision maker. I know that he's a gunslinger, is going to put the ball in harm's way. It is what it is. But Carter, let's be honest. He had a 99-yard drive or 90-plus yard drive that won you the game. He also had a very crucial turnover against Wisconsin, too, that could have led to a loss. So those are the things that I'm just talking about. Like, look, he's got a limit. I thought he was a much better decision maker than he had ever been. Look how far this kid has come since Southern. Like, let's be real with one another. It's a massive leap from where he was to where he has been. It's a credit to Joe Sloan and everybody that he's worked with. I'm going to say this, though, and I know that we've talked about this. I really think that they're going to run the football to help him out a lot early in the year. I know that they opened it up against Wisconsin. Carter, I just think that they're going to try to rum it down some people's throats. No pause. I think that we get into USC, okay, week one, the things that I'm hearing about how the offensive line and the interior look at the current moment, what you have at tackle. Carter, I'm not 100% sure you don't line up and try to run it right at him and say, and just drop your nuts on them. So I think that offensively, you got a really good, and you know what else it helps too? a receiving core that hasn't been here a long time, right? Like
Yeah.
you got Kyron Lacy, but you don't have a lot of experience elsewhere. I say all that. Your thoughts on my take and opinion?
Yeah, so it's weird. Right before I came on here, and I know I've referenced these guys before that play in these $1,000 dynasty leagues where they're drafting guys in college. One guy that that evaluates these guys so closely is really excited about is Xavier Thomas. Now, I'm a big Xavier guy, so I'm really excited to see what he could do. But I'm with you. These wide receivers are very inexperienced. And one thing, Bleav, outside of Kyron Lacy, that is a little bit concerning as far as just the quarterback is concerned. Last year, when it comes to a quarterback room, LSU had a poker term, the stone cold nuts, right? They had an unfreaking believable starter who was a dual threat maestro, who had one of the best statistical seasons we have ever seen from any player in this sport at any position. Then the backup quarterback was a completely different quarterback who was very good, right? Who was a very proven backup, and everyone would call him the best backup. So you had
Carter, let me ask you this question and rudely interrupt you. Outside of Georgia, outside of LSU, does Garrett Nussmeier not start over any other quarterback in the SEC last year?
Yeah, most of them. I would agree.
I mean, and so to your point, Carter, your backup was better than most starters in this conference.
Right. And you now look at the quarterback room, Bleav, and your starter won't be as good as Jaden Daniels was last year. That's not a shot at Garrett Nussmeier. It's just nobody is probably going to be as good as what Jaden Daniels was last year. And your backup quarterback situation is going to be as good as it was last year. So it's double the amount of pressure on Garrett Nussmeier to go out there and play well, which kind of lends its credence to running the football more, right? Because it takes a lot of the game or more of the game out of his hands, especially if he could tag on play action, mix in some 12 personnel, do some different things, and put out a different offense than what you did last year. So, you add in CJ Daniels, you add in Mason Taylor taking a step forward, a Trades Green stepping into that room as well. I still think, Bleav, that EA Sports, the most the talked about rankings, I do believe LSU is firmly in that top 10 offensive ranking, and I think them being the 6th best offense of all in college football is very justified.
Snap one against USC. I know that camp's not here yet. Who are your 3 starting receivers? Play one.
Yeah, so I will tell you who I think will start, and that will be Chris Hilton, Kyron Lacy, and more than likely Aaron Anderson in the slot. The 3 best receivers for me, Bleav, is Kyron Lacy, Chris Hilton, and the slot being Xavier Thomas, with CJ Daniels having a heavy rotation as a number 4 guy, with the potential to take over for Chris Hilton, which is something I could very well see happen. I think those guys, for me, are in a different tier as the top 4 wide receivers on this team. And then after that, you get into Aaron Anderson, you get into Shelton Sampson, Kyle Parker, and then it gets very spicy even after that, right? We have not seen Kylan Bleav in a camp setting. We have not seen Jelani Watkins, who's probably now the fastest receiver on this team. So it's a very interesting room, but I still think that those 4 guys will separate themselves. And I think my boldest take, Bleav, as far as this receiver room is concerned, Kyron Lacy will be the number 1 guy. I'm very Kyron, pro Kyron at this point. I understand a lot of people worry about the drops, but he is a very, very interesting player. And then my number 2 guy is Xavier Thomas. I think Xavier Thomas will shock a lot of LSU fans with how good he'll be next year.
I say that. I mean, that's the consensus. I mean, that's what they ran out there with last year. I mean, in the spring game, and that's the 3 that they ran out with Xavier Thomas rotating in with Aaron Anderson. I could fully see that. Carter, I want to get to the defense with you. Yeah. Look, we've talked a lot of hypothetical. I kind of want to get, scheme in reference to the depth that they have, what could happen here. Carter, I talked about last week, and something that you and I have brought up a lot is 3rd down. Man, look, I know that you're not going to have the offense potentially that you had a year ago, but Carter, I just don't see a scenario, a life where LSU is 115th in the country on third down again this year. Like I just can't see it. My wife was asking me what I was doing last night. I was sitting there watching Missouri game, like Missouri game after Missouri game. And I watched Missouri versus Georgia, and Blake Baker's sending the heat. Like, I know that guy will run really good edge. Carter, I got to start asking the question. I mean, man, are they not would he not do this here? And if so, like, I don't know if you don't have the personnel if you're sending that much heat on the quarterback. I don't know. I thought they were very aggressive in penetrating the other team's offense. It's so intriguing because I think in the spring we saw something that was so vanilla.
Yeah, and going back to the EA Sports ranking, the most controversial thing was LSU being number 18, which is really high for them coming off the year that they had last year. But maybe EA Sports knows more than any of us. They spent a crap ton of resources on this game, Blake. They didn't just spit rankings out. I mean, they actually studied film. They got Pro Football Focus grades. Maybe they're telling us something about this defense, right? That a lot of people are very concerned about.
What is it, though? Because I don't think it's an interior of the defensive line. I think you're going to have to mask things and do things that are really good to overdo that. Carter, I don't think it's the boundary of the corner. Carter, there's a very good shot that we see P.J. Woodland and Michael Turner in week 1.
Yeah, it's a higher likelihood than most would think, right? I do feel LSU is concerned about the personnel, right? But I will say this as someone who was not a big Matt House guy. I am a huge Blake Baker believer. I do not know Blake Baker. I know people.
Do you think they get much better on third down? I mean, Carter, they were 115th. You know what's ironic about all of this? They were 46 in the country in sacks last year. As bad as that secondary was, as bad as we talked about that defensive line, I mean, buddy, that's the best thing that they did. I mean, and you're going to send the heat. I just don't know if you're not going to be more aggressive because it's the only thing that that was positive from last year.
Yeah, and I think some of the sack numbers there, Blake, like total sacks, is because Jaden was in a lot of shootouts and you had to throw, so it increases the amount of sacks. But you are right. I mean, a guy like Braden Swinson was probably a little bit better than LSU fans remember. PFF was really high on Braden Swinson. And if you go back and actually rewatch the games, Swinson was probably a little bit better than we remember. I felt sometimes he
should have been starting.
Yeah, I felt at times he didn't carry out his assignments as consistently as one would like.
Neither did anybody else.
Right, exactly. So, I think he might be a little bit better than we think, as he's, very clearly in the prime of his LSU career. But yeah, I am such a big Blake Baker guy. But Blake, I am very concerned about the personnel, the actual personnel, all three levels, how things are going to fit. And this, if you're just a college football fan, let's just say you're just watching this, you're not even an LSU fan. This will be a really fun litmus test on how important coaching is versus the talent, because there are so many guys back from last year's defense to this year's defense. And if this defense performs considerably better, that is a good sign that coaching matters a lot more than we initially thought compared to the talent. Because look, Blake, there are a lot of guys back that will start and play a lot that just were not good players last year. And hopefully good coaching could fix that.
I gave this scenario last week. Tell me if you like it, love it, or hate it, or just in neutral. Remember in 2021 when Orgeron got fired and let Durante Jones call whatever he wanted to call defensively, and how much better that defense got literally overnight? Then, Carter, in 2022, you actually weren't that bad defensively. Could that be where you're at? And I agree about your question, like, hey, is it personnel or is it talent? I mean, or coaching. I mean, dude, in 2021, we saw it. Like, literally, Carter, you're on the ropes of beating Bama on the road. I mean, you're putting Bryce Young in a blender to some extent and him not knowing what to do. Who, Mike Jones? still remember that sack that he had in Tuscaloosa in 2021 on Bryce Young, the Heisman Trophy winner. So I just get to a place where I ask the question, Carter, and it's why, like, I understand that you're talking about personnel. One thing that I'm very intrigued, though, by, I don't know if you had this kind of level of depth last year, though. I do think that they did really good at recruiting high school. Buddy, there's a kid that everybody's talking about in that building right now, and Debo Atkins. They are all over. Like, they can't stop talking about it. I literally got a text message before I started my 6 p.m. show. It's like, Debo Atkins, another great day. You got Reliford, you got McKinley, you have McBride. I mean, Carter, the depth they have, though, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, my biggest sleeper is Debo, and
dude, they can't stop talking about him. Look, this has been happening for 2 weeks. They posted a video. LSU posted a video of him wearing the rep. Did you see that?
Yeah,
I mean, dude is like, you know who he is? He's I'm going to say it. He's a young DeMarvin Clark.
I try not to talk so much about him because he's
going ball out, dude. I'm telling you.
You get these accusations when you interview a kid, and I haven't talked to him in a while, but I do have text conversations with him from time to time. He is very, very impressive. He plays for a lot of reasons bigger than the game of football, which you can learn about in the interview I did with him. But he is very, very impressive. And that was a top 5 interview I've ever done with anyone. And I've interviewed some great people in my career. I do think he's very good. He's a sideline guy.
Talking about him.
And one thing I like about him is he challenged himself transferring to Texas, high school in Texas, a far higher level of competition. And he was one of the, if not the best defensive player in the state of Texas last year, him and Colin Simmons and a few others. So he's just really good. And I try to pinch myself sometimes, knowing that I got to interview this guy before his massive LSU career, and he views himself as a Patrick Queen type of talent. He really thinks he's going to be great, and I love to see that.
Jonathan Villa sent a $9.99 super chat. Thank you, Jonathan. Says, Blake and Carter, can y'all talk about the impact of Gabe Reliford and Don McKinley becoming a bona fide starter would mean for Baker can do up front, mixing alignments and personnel up front? I'll let you go first. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat.
Yeah, Reliford is another one of those guys that I like a lot. I've gotten to know his parents a little bit. Shout out to Ray, big supporter of both of ours, actually. And I really, really like Gabe. Obviously, track and field background. We've seen this guy run. He will hawk down a running back. Pause.
Not Tua, too.
Not that. But he takes pride in chasing down running backs and receivers. He's that type of athlete, plays with that type of motor. So I really, really love Gabriel Reliford and McKinley. The body transformation was pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. And look, with a new DC coming into this room, and these aren't, the players that he recruited. This is a class that he did recruit, especially Debo. He has a very personal Blake Baker connection with Debo, going back to his Missouri days. Baker is really excited about the young guys. Basically what I've heard from the actual athletes themselves and just people in the building. So I do think Blake Baker will be a little bit more ambitious playing younger guys that could be more productive than some of these older guys who last year weren't good. I think Baker's going to have a little bit quicker of a pull putting the younger guys in and mixing things up front. So, one of my favorite.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I like McKinley. McKinley's grown on me, Blake. I was initially more of a year 2 guy on him, but seeing his body transformation, who else had, pretty big body transformation before he played? It was Mason Smith. And Mason Smith versus UCLA right out the gate was really, really freaking good. So hopefully Dominic McKinley can be that, because there has never been a time where LSU needs that. I still think the best will be year 2 for him, but I'm really excited to see what he can do in year 1.
He's going to have to develop quickly. Look, I do think – here's what I Bleav. I think Gabe Reliford has time to develop. Like, I think things can be held down. Like, he doesn't have to be an every down starter. Don McKinley is got to be ready now. And I think that those are the two biggest differences between the both of them is that because of necessity, at least what we think right now, like, look, Xavier Suggs could come in here and do really good. Gio Paez could come in here and do really good. I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a different leap of guys taking that big of a leap in football versus baseball. I mean, baseball, it happens all the time. Guys come in here and hit 300, no big deal. But I just think that Dom doesn't have the luxury of, hey, man, I'm having a really bad game. I'm getting outclassed. He's going to have to continue to run out there. And look, man, I got to be real with you, Carter. It's a question that you and I have talked about a lot. I have not thought that this interior defensive line has played great for a while. And look, me and you have talked about this for a long time. Carter, they've gotten abused by offensive lines that LSU, this school, has no business of being abused by. And that's the issue I have. If Alabama runs the ball on you, if Georgia runs the ball on you, all right, I ain't going to say nothing. But when Ole Miss is clapping them cheeks like an episode video on OnlyFans, that's where I start having issues. I got to see Don McKinley before I see it because I've seen Gabe Reliford go up against a 4-star top 50 recruit left tackle and get 2 sacks on him. What I have not seen is Don McKinley in the interior, which, Carter, it's a different world. It's like going to – I'm not going to say that because I'll get canceled, even though it would be a really good joke. It's like going to a completely different atmosphere, playing on the edge and playing on the inside. So for me, do I think he can do it? Yeah, I think he can do it. I just can't put all my chips in there yet.
Yeah, I'll still stick by McKinley being more of a year 2 guy. That's how I see it. You know, I don't give out a whole lot of like bona fide year 1 grades on people, Blake, because it is so hard.
How bad did not having a D-line coach, a true D-line coach last year, hurt you?
It hurt. It hurt in a lot of different ways. But honestly, Blake, it's so hard to play Division I Power 5 football as a true freshman. It's so hard. And I think at the beginning of the BK tenure, it was a small recruiting class, but you just happen to have 4 guys who are really good just right out of the gate, which is rare. It does not happen like that more often than not. But yeah, I hope McKinley's ready. I hope I'm wrong. I hope year 1, right? Because just because I think you'll blow up in year 2 doesn't mean you can't play in year 1, but it's just going to be so hard for him to be good right out of the gate, knowing there's so much pressure on him to be good right out of the gate.
All right, last one for you. Carter, I see Joe and Tammy. I'm assuming Joe says coaching matters. I completely agree with it. I gotta get your thought on this. Aiden Anding. And look, we'll talk about these kids that are committing, like Damian Shanklin. We've talked about him before. After their commitment, we'll go that route. Carter, am I reading? Well, actually, I know I'm not. Your thoughts of Aiden Anding getting offered by Frank Wilson and not the DB's coach? I find that to be a problem.
Yeah, I do to a certain degree. So first I want to show you this, Blake. I wish I had 2 of these. I'll send it to you. So this guy he's an artist named Chuck Broad. And my guy, Ty Christiana. Look at how cool this is, man. Your guy. Isn't this your favorite baseball player on the team right now? Monster.
I like Monster a lot. That's pretty badass. Yeah.
It has got a SIG and gold pin on it. So my guy, Ty Christiana, who runs the show, brought this to me. And it's Chuck Broad. And the dude, I've got to put this up somewhere. I'll try and go get another one for you, man. But I say this because I was at the show. I was set up. Hayden Travinsky was there, signed a bunch of autos. But there was a guy. I don't remember his name. I'm trying to find him. He just stopped by and I talked to him for like a minute. My booth was kind of crowded. And he was like, hey, Aiden Anding, this kid. And it was a guy from Ruston. So if you're watching this right now, please reach out to me. I want to send something to you. He's like, Carter, Aiden Anding, you're sleeping on him. You haven't talked enough about him on the channel. LSU's going after him now. I know him, and you're going to be blown away when you watch him. And I watched him today, Blake. This kid is a competitor, right? I'm watching him.
I watched him go one-on-one versus Deshaun McBride, and everybody says, oh, he's 5'11". All right. I've seen the kid play up personal. The kid can flat out play. All the excuses that they've been given is bullshit.
What do you mean excuses? I'm interested.
I mean, he doesn't have the prototypical size. He's not over 6 foot. He's 175 pounds. Can he play? The issue I have is that, look, my whole thing about Corey was never recruiting. I never once came out here and talked about him recruiting. Not once. I said, look, over the last 40 years, he was 97th in passing yards allowed. It's an issue. He's not had success. I never talked about his recruiting, not once. Now Frank Wilson goes and offers this kid. Regardless, you're showing me what you're doing behind the scenes with your actions. The kid is going out there and saying, Frank Wilson offered me, not Corey Raymond. Then you got sourcing out there that he's all in on DJ Pickett. That's great. The kid might not be a corner, though. Jake Olsen might be the one coaching him.
Yeah, so, it's weird. Yeah, the Pickett situation's weird.
Very weird. And so I just get to, last thing before I get it over to you, it's just I get to a place where you're starting to confirm some of my worries. Like, you're starting to do it now. Now I'm not going there. I'm not saying hit the panic button. I'm not saying hit the little red button like it's Men in Black and forget that this happened. I'm not doing that. But you cannot convince me that that's not a big action. And then here's the worst thing that I have: people in this media corps sticking up for and not coming to reality. Oh, it's Corey Raymond. Oh, okay, man.
I know because anytime I say anything about Corey, it's the end of the world, man. I feel like a SWAT team's gonna fly in, steal.
All right, don't talk about Corey. What's up with Cortez? Everybody seems to continue to point the finger at Cortez Hankton, even though he had 4 guys drafted in the first 60 picks. You want to know why I'm not getting on Cortez Hankton? Because he signed a kid that was a 2-star named Ladd McConkey. That's why.
Yeah, pretty good player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I will say this. I watched the ending today, and I understand, like, yeah, he completed in track and field and all that in any place, but he's not special athletically like other elite corners at LSU have been. Now, it's not the be-all, end-all. He is very fluid. He's got ball skills. This was his first year playing competitive football since middle school. He is a dominant, not a great, he is a dominant basketball player who plays. I watch his basketball game. His processing on a basketball court is ridiculous. His processing on a football field is ridiculous. He doesn't panic in the middle of routes. He is very fluid. This is a guy who went up against, and I did a full film study on my Patreon. You could see it for yourself. Went up against Trades Green. Okay. The freaky athletic 6'7" behemoth. And I understand the quarterback play wasn't great, and there was times where he had safety help over the top versus Trades, but he made some big time football plays, timing the football at its highest point. You could tell
against a dude at 6'8".
Yes. And you could tell he's getting high-level Division I football coaching from a Division I football legend in Kyle Williams. There's just a lot of boxes that this checks off. And one thing I really like about him is Blake, he plays a lot of press man coverage, which you don't see a lot of in high school because, a lot of defenses just play quarters in high school. This guy is not afraid. He is extremely competitive. And, yeah, is it a little bit of a long shot? Yeah, but you don't have any DVs. So I would think, Corey would be in on this kid, but I don't know. But Corey might be, might not be. I don't know. But Frank Wilson sees something in this guy, and I do too. I'm really excited to see him commit. And if you're watching this, Aiden, tell me who that person was that said that knows you, that came by my booth, because I really do want to send him something because I really enjoyed watching him today. All
right, last thing. I swear to God, then we got to go. 10-2 or bust for BK in year 3? Yes or no?
No. 10 no. I do think the schedule sets up really nicely for him. I wouldn't say 10 or 2 or bust. Because 9-3 might get you into the playoff.
$70 more million you got to pay him.
Yeah, 9-3 might get you in the playoff, though. If you go 9-3 and you get in the playoff, people feel great.
Right. See you next week, buddy. Thank you so much. Love the hat.
Yeah, dude. Your hat. You look sexy as hell, bro. Look at you.
You do too, man. I think it's just Tyler